So if we can invite Frances Carleton to come up, please. Frances has a Master of Counselling and Applied Psychotherapy and is the founder of Wild Talk, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, a counselling service providing free 24/7 assistance to persons working and volunteering with wildlife. She was a wildlife rescuer and rehabilitator until 2019, but in order to ensure Wild Talk retains its independence, she is not currently affiliated with any wildlife organisations. She is a practicing counsellor and psychotherapist with a focus on grief and trauma recovery, working in rural New South Wales and the Australian Capital Territory. She has presented both poster and oral presentations at more than 10 national and international conferences in the last 5 years.
He's given me a laser pointer. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to start by getting you all to do this for me. Excellent. So I now know that all of your arms work. So when I say by show of hands, I know that they do. Okay. So I'm here to talk to you about wildlife mental health. And this is your mental health. And because it's 4 o'clock on a Friday, I have bribery. So if you look like you're falling asleep, I will throw a sweetie at you for some sugar. I should also tell you that it's not in my bio, but I did stand-up comedy for 7 years. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about Wild Talk. I'm going to tell you about what we've seen so far in our service since the beginning of 2020. And then I'm going to talk about working in isolation and how debriefing might help, and then how to access our services. And if I've got any time at the end, which I hope I will have, is an opportunity for you to ask me any questions, and I don't care if they're curly. I don't know where I've got to point this thing. Okay. So I started in 2015 providing mental health support to my local groups when I was down in Jerrabomberra, which is on the New South Wales ACT border. And I decided that I couldn't be a wombat carer, which is what I desperately wanted to do because I didn't live the lifestyle for it. So I identified when I went to different trainings that I was able to offer a very different support to the wildlife community, which didn't involve looking after macropods, wombats, and other things. I ended up being a snake catcher, which I love, and I was also a reptile carer. And I said I'd never have turtles, and then of course I had 12 turtles in a paddling pool on my back deck. So I get where you lot are coming from. Okay, I love wildlife. So when I spoke in 2018 at this conference in Sydney, I talked about the potential impacts of wildlife care on your mental health. And everyone went, oh my God, this is the first time anyone's ever spoken about this. So I started formalizing Wild Talk to become a thing and had planned to launch it in 2020 at the 2020 conference. And then, of course, the bushfires happened and so did COVID. So everything got pulled forward to the beginning of 2020. And having worked in an employee assistance program, I decided to model Wild Talk on an employee assistance program, which is 6 free sessions of counselling, debriefing work with a qualified therapist of at least 5 years experience of therapy. But I also knew these people need someone that understands them. They don't want to have to explain what they're talking about. So I then also started working on developing training material based directly on wildlife caring experience for counsellors, but also for you. We also provide small grants, and I don't know if anyone in the room was recently the recipient of a $100 gift voucher. Occasionally we get some. I'm able to send those out for self-care purposes. And we are a charity with gift recipient status. This is what we've seen so far. This is just the last financial year. So these numbers are The number that's in the bracket is last year's financial numbers. So as you can see, in every state and territory, we have had an increase in calls. In the last 12 months, we have had 1,280 unique calls for mental health support from across the country. Now, if we look at the numbers that Wildlife Health Australia presented earlier on of 61,000 rescues in the organisation that they work with, every single one of those rescues has at least one person connected to it, if not 2 or 3 or 4. So these numbers represent just 2% of all of those rescues. The big number that you see there is the number of suicides that we've had in wildlife carers in the last financial year. They are unfortunately only anecdotal stories because the volunteer status of someone that suicides is not recorded, only the substantive position. So if they're a nurse in their day job, that's what gets registered. We only know about these because other carers who are friends with them, who've lost their friend, have rung us and told us they don't want to end up like their mate. This number is too high. We shouldn't be losing people doing this kind of work. New South Wales Parks and Wildlife just spoke about the fact that, you know, we represent a much higher rate of mental health than normal volunteering, because we know what we do in this space can be absolutely heartbreaking. However, nearly 50% of all of our calls are interpersonal. They're not about the animals, they're about the people. Okay. So, by show of hands, who's had a problem? Who here doesn't like people? Oh, right. I don't think I have enough lollies. Okay, who's ready to catch? I'm going in this direction first. Okay. Okay. Did anyone get one over there? Okay, sugar, coming, incoming. Okay. So, people generally don't like people, especially when they're wildlife carers. Because people, and without people, they wouldn't contribute to the reason why we are needed in the first place. So unfortunately, we tar everybody with the same brush. It is what it is. But as you'll see, the grief and bereavement that we're talking about is actually just over a quarter of all of our calls. Most people know how to grieve, but they don't know how to deal with other people. So, recent observations, the last 18 months. What we've seen, and this has been coming out of people recovering from COVID and from bushfires. So the theme for the last 18 months has been that they've come out and they've decided they now want to start talking about these things. So which is why I picked it for this year's conference presentations. Because it is something that happens a lot. So by show of hands, I promise I won't throw anything at you. By show of hands, who here works on their own most of the time? Okay. So when we did our survey, we did it through free online surveys, and we used our Facebook page and our Instagram page and our mailing list, and also sending the link to a number of wildlife organisations that support us to distribute that survey for us. And we had over 350 respondents. Isolation was present in calls from the very beginning of Wild Talk, but we've seen this increase in the last 18 months. Isolation can be from physical distance. So those of you that are working remotely, where's Cooper PD? Where's Cooper PD? Cooper PD is in the house. Okay, Cooper PD is in the house. They cover the same area as Germany, right? So physical distance, remote working, isolation from peers and loved ones because of the heaviness of the workload. And of course, interpersonal isolation. So-and-so doesn't like me, so we don't talk to that person anymore. This often happens in wildlife circles because we're not always very nice to each other as we are to the animals. So we see reduced social isolation, and this can often be in families, but also from each other, because we don't necessarily understand what's going on, what's being said. We also, as wildlife carers, because as New South Wales mentioned, we tend to be on the older end of the demographic. We're very good at sucking it up and just getting on with it and not telling anybody about what's happening for us. We can only put so much fluid in the glass before it overflows. So it's common that we talk about isolation in wildlife people. And in a gathering such as we have here right now, there's probably, even though half of you put your hands up when I said who doesn't like people, you're in pretty close confines to them right now. But I think you're amongst good people. These are good people. So not all people are bad people, and not all people want to hurt wildlife. This is the time to make connection. What we have noticed is that over the last sort of 18 months or so, people have started talking about COVID and the isolation that happened during that. They've started talking about their experiences in the bushfire. It's not easy, but you need to talk about it. We often don't want to talk about it because my experience wasn't as bad as her experience. I don't want to bother my mate because she's got enough going on. That's why we're here. This gathering proves that there are good people out there and that there are supportive people out there. What we do is laden with disaster and heartbreak. The occasional joyous moment may also come with the unknown of what happens next to the animal that's been released. And of course, the really important thing here is that your experience is valid and valuable. It's not to be compared with anybody else's experience because you are unique, just like the animals that you look after. I'm not going to get to see them. I know. I came here in 2010 for my honeymoon and we went to Rottnest Island and we were there for 5 hours and we didn't see a single one of those bloody things. So every time someone says to me, hey, how's Perth? I'm like, well, there's no quokkas and I had my hubcaps nicked off my hire car. So, but that's right. Not even the quokkas wanted to come out and say hello. So what we're looking at here is is one of the responses to the survey. And I've got actually the poster out on the table as well, if anybody wants a couple. I've only got about 40 left, so you're not all going to get one. But it will be going up on our website. So when we asked one of the questions we asked was around work health safety training, and specifically working in isolation training. Now, the outer ring is the training on working in isolation. The big section is 86%. They don't get any training on working in isolation. The middle section is general work health safety training. 50% said no, they don't get any general work health safety training. And the center ring is 71% that they don't get any specific mental health support. Now, unlike your police, fire and AMBO counterparts, many wildlife carers and rescuers are on their own. They don't work in teams, they don't work in pairs. They're out in the middle of bloody nowhere at 2 o'clock in the morning, dragging something off the road. They've sometimes got a member of public screaming at them because they weren't quick enough to get there. And then you get back in the car afterwards and you kind of just have to either go home and drive home and don't talk to anybody. The member of public's just been screaming at you and you've just had to euthanize, using violent means because you don't have any green dream, the animal that you went out there to rescue. This is tough. You're there on your own, you're not working in a team. Some people are lucky enough to have very, very supportive partners. Some people are lucky enough to have supportive other members of the groups that they go to, but the majority of you are working on your own? So just a quick one, by show of hands, who here spends the majority of their time on their own? Right, okay. So this lack of training around work health safety, mental health support, and this working in isolation really comes into that potentially dangerous space because it puts you in dangerous situations. It can lead to poor mental and physical health outcomes. It can lead to things like PTS, grief and loss, further isolation, moral injury. Happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk about, what's moral injury? It's a new thing. But I tell you what, pretty much everyone in this room will have it of some degree. Physical injury and many other sort of types of physical and mental injury. So just out of curiosity, get those arms going again. Who here has their human first aid certificate? Wow, you know what? That is way better than I thought it was going to be. Thank you. No, I quite often ask that question in sessions, and probably about 5% of the room goes up. Human mental health first aid certificates are really handy because you get that doctor's ABC training. So going into a spot and immediately assessing what the danger is for you, for the animal, or any bystanders. So if you don't already have your human mental first aid, go for it. It's a good thing to get. Saw a massive St. John building as I was driving in from the airport. It was awesome. So this responsibility for your mental health and your physical health is left entirely up to you, which of course it always is. But when you're volunteering for an organisation, they actually have responsibility under the different sections in the Volunteering Australia guidelines to look after your mental health as well as your physical health. So your organisations, if you're a member of one, really could be putting into place policies around physical and mental health, work health safety, if they haven't already. So distress on call outs. I decided not to put the picture up there that I was going to put up. So instead I just put someone spilling some tea, because if you're from England, that's an absolute disaster. So as many of you will be aware, wildlife work isn't easy. As much as we would love for it all to be cute, fluffy, big brown eyes looking at you with love and affection, sadly, it's more often fear-ridden eyes and more often injury and death. It's either from the injuries or the violent end which you have at your hands. The majority of wildlife workers, as I said, in the field don't have access to euthanasia medication and have to make do with shot or heavy force. These people, yourselves included, deeply care about the animals that you're there to help. So ending a life to prevent suffering isn't as easy as it sounds. I've observed that most often poor mental health outcomes, little decompressing, debriefing or self-care has happened in the days post the event. We just get on with it because we've got so much to do. We're so busy. This is what we call, in the therapeutic world, a coping strategy. In the short term, it's helpful. In the long time, not so much. So this is where I'm going to get you to write something down. This is just for your eyes only. I want you to write down a single word. Always, often, sometimes, never. I'm awesome. To the question, how often do you just get on with it? So it's never, often, sometimes, never. I'm awesome. I always put myself first. Okay, you all done it? Okay, who, by show of hands, I may throw something at you this time. Who put always? Okay. Who put Often. Just get on with it. Okay. Who put sometimes? Okay, and who put never? I always put myself first. Right, okay. Now, there was an awful lot of hands that didn't go up that obviously wrote something else completely different, but that's okay. So, talking the incident through with a professional or prepared debriefer can considerably reduce the long-term negative impacts of distressing events. And I'm not just talking about wildlife events here, I'm talking about any distressing event, any. 89% of the respondents to our survey said that their work had caused distress at some time. When comparing negative and positive adjectives such as difficult, distressing and dangerous, they came out as the higher likelihood in rescues and of encountering them rather than easy, calm and safe. The Beyond Blue study between 2016 and 2020 of the National Mental Health and Wellbeing Study of Police and Emergency Services found many similarities to the issues and concerns encountered by wildlife carers when it came to distressing events. With this in mind, how many organisations require health training? So this is where I get to blow my own horn a little bit. So, speaking to someone who understands what you're saying without having to explain the nuances of language was top priority for 88% of the respondents. And that also corresponds with when I asked the same question in 2018 and in 2020 for the conference then. By show of hands, who's ever had to explain what a pinky is to anyone? Right. What about viable? Okay. What about those, how many reptile carers have we got in the room? Okay, how about bromate? Okay, keep your hand up. All right. Okay, what about myopathy or mange? Okay. And then we start looking at the state and territory rules for everybody. It's a little bit different. That's already been touched on. Plus the group politics that happen because we always know they're so easy. Okay. So these are things that Wild Talk make a point of understanding. These are just a few of the words and situations that people who work with wildlife throw out in conversation, okay? That the general public and teeth, my teeth have gone. Can I, generalist, generalist mental health services, they just don't understand and they will often ask you to explain so they can help you better. You don't want to have to explain this to a person that you're speaking to when you're in distress. The last thing you want to have to do is go, oh, a heat stress event? Well, what does that look like? Oh. You don't want to have to. You want someone who knows what that looks like, smells like, sounds like. You want someone you can just say heat stress event and they kind of go, that's awful, that's terrible. And they genuinely mean it because they know what that looks like, smells like, sounds like. If you're from defence, you might contact Open Arms because they specialise in talking to people who are returning from war zones. If you're someone wanting help with disordered eating, you might contact the Butterfly Foundation. A parent who's lost a child before the age of 5 might ring Red Nose. These are specialist services because it comes with understanding language and conditions that are uniquely presented in these clients. The language isn't the only thing that's unique to you. You'll also find yourselves in all sorts of situations, in wind, rain, snow, and blazing heat. Black Dog now offer mental health support for first-line responders. They include wildlife rescue in that. It's awesome that you're in there. It's fantastic. It's great that it's an option. And that is what we want you to be, recognised as frontline responders. I've been fighting for it for the last 5 years in speeches that I've been doing. They are generalists. Maybe think about it like this way. When I had my hip replaced, I went to an orthopedic surgeon. I didn't go to a plastic surgeon. Anyone who's ever had any specialist treatment, you didn't go to your GP. They referred you to the specialist. Yes, we can say grief is grief, and we can say trauma is trauma, but how you get there is unique, just as you are. And this is why connection is so important. Face to face with friends, family, loved ones, online, by phone, social media. Good in small doses. It's not always helpful. If you are distressed, it can be difficult to reach out to those close to you because, as I said before, you might be comparing your experience to somebody else's. You might not want to be bothering your mate that you normally talk to. But you know what? This little guy hides in plain sight as a stick. You're not a stick. You're a good human being, and by your very nature, you require connection to thrive. Yes, I'll concede that the connection to animals is also important, but they won't stop you from being hard on yourself and tell you to eat your dinner in one sitting. I suggest you gather your support networks around you. This is an excellent place to start. If you don't know who they might be, feel free to grab me afterwards. I'll be outside at the back table to have a chat so we can figure it out for you. But the others in this room are connections. You might meet someone here this weekend who can be your connection or debrief buddy. Don't be afraid to reach out. It's the strongest thing you'll ever do. So this slide is different than the one you've got in your book. So debriefing is an intervention immediately following an event. It's usually within the 72 hours after an event, and aims to mitigate long-term distress and prevent the emergence of post-traumatic responses in those that have been to the event. We are in the process of developing an online module where you can teach yourself how to debrief effectively. So you can have a quick chat with your friend and debrief. When we asked the respondents of how many people know how to debrief, I love this, 92% said, yes, I know what debriefing means. And then I gave them 6 options of what debriefing was. And the slide you have in your book is the top response, which is 59% said having a chat with a mate. That is not debriefing. Only 12% said debrief with a professional or trained person. We would like that to be the other way around. My inner voice gives me a hard time about what went wrong, and I reflect on that for next time. It is not debriefing. It's useful, but your inner voice is always going to be your harshest critic. I talk it through with my partner. They don't really understand, but it helps to get it out. Also not debriefing. I'm lucky enough to have a great team, and we chat about the last months together. We're close, but we can do better. And 5, I write down all the difficult things that happened in that rescue. Now, there's a lot to be said for learning from that, but with a proper debrief, you can learn even more about yourself, but also about the way you do rescues. And it has been mentioned already today about learning from those experiences. 72% of the respondents said that they would access professional debriefing if it was available. It is. It is. Most callers, when they call us, are in significant distress and are highly, highly volatile. When they call us, it's very difficult to debrief at that moment, but we try. So debriefing training, 85% said they would access debriefing training if it was available or accessible. We are working on having an online debriefing basics up and running by the end of September. But the barriers are this. Leadership engagement in organisations need to endorse the training and mental health in their carers in general. Organisations that have developed workplace mental health and wellbeing strategies that have sustained an authentic commitment are rare, as mentioned today, because we already know that from the levels of work health safety, the training that's given. What's required is long-term, visible and authentic commitment from the leaders around mental health for their workers and volunteers. There is also still resistance to reaching out for assistance for all the reasons that I said earlier. We don't want to bother somebody else. We just want to get on with it. Pairing up can be difficult to find someone with debriefing. It is a barrier, and we know that it always will be, but we are always available 24/7. Our online course will be somewhere in the region of 20 to 30 minutes long. It will have an audio track so you can listen to it as well as read it, because I know that you'll do it while you're feeding Joey's. See, I know you. It's about what was difficult? What were you feeling? What did you do well? There is no recrimination in effective debriefing. It can be done peer-to-peer amongst mates. So, call to action. The top part of the photograph is what everyone expects from wildlife care. The bottom part is the reality. When you're faced with a distressing incident, animal or not, you've got to consider yourself first. Who flew here on an aeroplane? All right, what do they tell you about the oxygen mask? Put it on yourself first, because if you don't, you might collapse, fall into the aisle and become a trip hazard to everybody on the damn plane. Same with self-care. Engage in self-care. Give yourself a moment or three. Drink your morning coffee while it is still hot. Yes, coffee has a state where it is still hot, right? Engage with our weekly memorial moments on Facebook and Instagram, or our Silent Saturdays. Sign up for information for when the debriefing course is online. There's about 10 sheets on the tables where you can write your name and your email address if you want to be emailed when that course goes live. It will be free. If you run an organisation, please consider asking us to deliver a critical incident or group debriefing course for you. We can do it in person or online. On a personal level, debrief often. We want to hear your stories. We want to help you prevent collapse later. Prevention is better than cure. If you don't have anything to debrief, consider that preventative care, because we're here for you. We understand you, and we understand the animals. We are available 24/7. We are across all states and territories. We have therapists across the country, so you can work online, you can work by phone, or you can do face-to-face if you have someone close to you. We offer up to 6 free sessions, but we will not cut you off at 6. If you develop a relationship with your therapist, we will continue to pay that therapist for you. We just ask that you contribute after 6. We also have, the only criteria is that you're a wildlife worker. You can talk about anything you want to talk about. You don't have to talk about animals. If you do, we'll know what you're talking about. But if you've had significant loss, you had a divorce, you're in financial issues, whatever, we can help with that as well. The only criteria is that you're a wildlife person. Thank you.
We've got one question. I think we can squeeze it. I'm sure you're going to have thousands at break, but does anyone here have a really burning question that you'd like to ask in front of everybody?
So, we've had 3 instances in the last 3 months of dog impact on our kangaroo. The last one was pretty horrific. The lady in question is affected, obviously. The son is autistic and he's really affected. So how do you get these people to
Oh, we've lost the mic.
300 Wild Talk.
But what if they think they don't want it or don't need help?
Unfortunately, unfortunately, you can't make somebody go to therapy. You have to want to do it. And that this is a conversation I have all the time. It's quite often people will have been to a therapist and will have had a bad experience. When we first started, I quite often heard the catch cry of, "Oh, you're not going to tell me to give up wildlife care, are you?" And I'm like, "No, where's that coming from?" "Oh, because I went to a psychologist once and they said to me, if it's causing you too much distress, just find a different hobby." Oh, you'd be amazed at how many times I've heard that. So they were wary about calling us. Just as with any kind of therapeutic service or any kind of service that you engage with, it is about relationship. So the first thing is to give us a call. If you don't like the person or you don't feel the person that you're talking to gets you, ask to speak to somebody else, and we'll keep going until you find the right person. But you can't make somebody who doesn't want to go and talk to someone. All you can do is model behaviour. So if you think it's a good idea and you think, "Oh, I might go," then they might follow suit. Yeah.
One more round of applause. Thanks. Oh.